How is generative AI poised to transform the financial sector? And what ethical considerations must be addressed to harness its full potential? Well, today I'm joined by the Chief Data and Transformation Officer at DBS Bank. And together we're going to explore the groundbreaking impact of generative AI on banking. And we'll also learn more about how DBS Bank is embracing AI to enhance productivity, reduce administrative burdens, and even improve customer experiences. But most importantly, all while maintaining rigorous governance and ethical standards. And what does that mean for the future of banking and the roles of those within it? These are just a few of the things that we're going to explore today. Delivering daily content to 140,000 of you wonderful monthly listeners across the globe is no small feat. I don't want to take all the credit here because it wouldn't be possible without the backing of our dedicated sponsors and partners. And I also want to shine a light on the fact that legacy managed file transfer tools are looking dated. They often lack the security that today's remote workforce demands. And companies that continue relying on that outdated tech, they're in danger of putting their sensitive data at risk. Attention IT professionals, are you tired of juggling these multiple servers for secure file sharing? Integrated shared folders and email plus a comprehensive REST API. Kiteworks simplifies your workflow. For administrators, you can experience unmatched functionality and integration that traditional MFT servers just can't touch. Step into the future of secure managed file transfer with Kiteworks by going to kiteworks.com to get started. That's kiteworks.com. And remember, Kiteworks is also FedRAMP moderate authorized. Thank you for your patience today. This is the moment you've been waiting for. It's time to welcome my guest onto the show. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell everyone listening a little about who you are and what you do?
So my name is Nimish Panchmatia. I am the Chief Data and Transformation Officer of DBS Bank in Singapore for the entire group. My role entails largely looking around corners, figuring out what's coming, and then making sure that we understand it really well, bringing it into the organization, understanding the implications, and then determining what books of work we need to develop and then therefore deploy into the organization so that we're future ready at every given point or on an ongoing basis. What I cover the entire data agenda for the bank. And so data is a tool for transforming the way we work and the way work gets done. So that be it through AI, ML, be it through generative AI, data governance, data management. I'm also responsible for what is in the outside world known as agile at scale, but internally we call it managing through journeys. This is where we move the traditional silos that exist in banks and have existed for hundreds of years into a more horizontal structure so that it addresses actually customer journeys rather than organizational efficiency. And that does not mean we're adding in inefficiency at all. In fact, what we've seen is it gets very efficient. When we arrange ourselves around the jobs for the customer, quality improves, stickiness improves, and therefore loyalty improves and revenues improve. That's another part of what I do. I'm also responsible for customer experience and employee experience for the bank, so future of work. And finally, I'm also responsible for the innovation agenda of the bank. So how do we accelerate and how do we influence innovation? I have a team of people that work with the entire organization to help them innovate within their own spaces. And also, innovation is not supposed to be done by 4 or 5 people. I mean, to be an innovative company, everybody needs to be focused on innovating services and products. So that's largely my remit, if you like.
Love that. And there's so many different reasons I was excited to get you on the podcast today, because there is a lot of hype around AI at the moment, and different industries have different levels of, let's say, cautiousness around adopting this technology. And I've spoken to many banks on this podcast. I even had one last year, or it was earlier this year, at a tech conference. They were scheduled to meet me at the conference, have a podcast, but their senior management called time on the podcast before we even recorded because they weren't comfortable with having a conversation about AI. So I see a lot of different attitudes towards it. So I'm curious, as someone right in the heart of this space, can you elaborate on how you see the transformational potential of generative AI in the financial sector, particularly in terms of things like cost efficiency and savings, because it's not just about look at the shiny new technology. We're solving real problems with it, right?
So maybe you talked about people being scared to talk about it. We talk about the potential. So in terms of, I'd say first and foremost, one shouldn't be scared of this, right? It's here. It's not that it's suddenly going to disappear. And we've got to embrace it and embrace it responsibly and make the best of what, the advancement of this technology. And I think there's a lot of benefits. Now, we've got to be careful. There are downsides as well, but these we need to be very conscious about and manage them correctly, right? Now, in terms of potential, I think it's huge. It will really change the way work gets done. And change managed correctly, it has huge potential. The ability to take knowledge and unstructured data from many different places and bring it in and being able to make it searchable, make it understandable, models synthesize this stuff, summarize it. I think that will remove so much toil from the day-to-day work of people that it will free up significant capacities for people to be able to do higher value stuff, right? So, I mean, I don't know about your role, but in my role and in a lot of my colleagues, we spend a lot of time looking for stuff, right? And a large organization is full of very rich knowledge that really helps people do stuff. Now, but to get to it is quite difficult. There's a lot of formats to start with, different repositories where they sit. Some are not really holistic documents or holistic information. It's one dimension or one prism. Bringing all this together and being able to synthesize what's there and make sense of it and be able to query it from different angles, I think will reduce significant amount of toil, significant amount of process steps that exist in organizations, and therefore allow for this efficiencies to be invested in the right place. And for me, the right places are how can we up our customer experience, how can we up our employee experience, and then as a result of that, how can we have better outcomes, financial or otherwise.
And as you said a moment ago there are so many great opportunities, but equally there are other areas that need to be managed. You need to balance that power and responsibility accordingly. So with the advancements in generative AI, how do you see banks balancing that power of this technology with the responsibility it entails, especially in terms of things like ethical considerations, because a big talking point across so many different sectors right now?
Yeah, I know that there are certain regulators that are taking it very seriously. In Singapore, the MAS is working on FEAT and Veritas, which are principles that govern the use of AI and ML and use of data. So we know that the regulators are engaged in this, but it's an evolving space. How are we thinking about it? So we think about it along the lines of fairness, ethical accountability, and transparency, right? And we've got our own standards because this isn't the AI ML journey is not new for us, right? We started way back in 2018, 2019, when what is today known as traditional AI was really the cutting edge. So we did develop frameworks around how to be responsible when using data and when using AI. And that gave us a good basis to then extend it to generative AI, right? And we are very deliberate. One, we've focused largely on copilots because we're not yet quite comfortable around autonomous AI. We don't feel it's ready to be left by itself to customers or even to employees at the moment, right? Hallucination, appropriateness, bias, all these things still have to be resolved. So as I say, our focus has largely been around Copilot, and we're very deliberate about every single use case. And so we have several levels of validation that the solutions that we're putting out there are fit for purpose from a risk perspective. And it goes right to the top where there are senior people. Again, the topmost committee, which we call responsible data use, is chaired by me. And I have my peers from compliance, legal, HR, and various other units where we will deliberate whether the use case has covered every single side of every single angle of risk. And being that deliberate has allowed us to maybe not be so fast at going out with these solutions, but whatever we have out there, and we've got over 20 use cases in production now, they're well thought through, they're being used, and we're seeing that we're not seeing anything that worries us in terms of the Gen AI going its own way, right? So we are very deliberate. So I know of some organizations that have actually gone out and put this out in front of customers, but they're not really regulated industries. So banking, healthcare, these are heavily regulated. and you're not allowed to be wrong anytime. Your regulator will come after you. So we've got to be very deliberate about it. And until we're absolutely comfortable that this technology allows us to be at the same standard, we will be very careful before we put it out there. But as far as Copilot is concerned, I think we've made a lot of progress, and we continue to accelerate the use cases across the organization.
And there's a lot of misconceptions out there at the moment that AI is going to replace things, and people go all in on AI or all in on humans. And for me, I think the real magic happens when there's this seamless synergy between data, humans and machines all working together in ways that they can't do completely on their own in their own right. So what steps do you think are crucial to unlock the full potential of this technology in this way?
So first of all, is it going to have change? Is it going to impact roles? Yes. But it will impact roles. It won't necessarily impact people, right? I think as this evolves and it gets adoption and we find the best uses for it and also find areas where we don't want to use it, this will result into maybe some activities and some certain types of roles being impacted. But it's also going to create a lot of new roles. I mean, I was talking with somebody earlier today, managing the outputs of this generative capability. That's a new job that's going to have to be created, and you're going to need supervisors for these models, right? And those supervisors are going to have to be humans, and so that creates a new role altogether. And that brings it very nicely to your second point, or your second question, which is this interaction. Yes, that's where the magic is, right? Again, if you're use case driven and you're absolutely clear what outcomes you want, and you understand the risks and mitigation of those risks, that balance is important to get this, the beauty, as you say, of these three coming together. It's not just necessarily generative AI that is going to bring magic. I actually think the interaction of the generative, which is unstructured data, and structured data, which is now referred to as traditional AI or traditional AI ML, these coming together and the abilities you've got in terms of compute and people being able to instruct how this works, I think that's going to be where real magic will happen.
100% with you there. And another role that I keep hearing about are data stewards. So I'm curious, how do you see data stewards playing a role in ensuring that accuracy, quality and security of AI models? And do you think this role is going to become increasingly important? It certainly feels that way.
At least in our organization, it's a very important role and has been for several years. So data steward in the traditional sense was a much easier job in traditional AI ML, right? You got to make sure you've got right level of metadata. You got to make sure you've got right link lineages. You've got your processes in place. You've got a platform in place. You've got your tooling in place, and they ensure that the right kind of governance is there. Who gets access to data, who doesn't, and for what type of use cases, right? It's a traditional data steward job. Now, that was fine because it's structured data is actually quite rich in its way, and it can be misused. If you need data for your job, you should get it, right? But everybody having all sorts of data is that from a risk perspective, it needed to be mitigated, and where then the data steward role became stronger. Now, when you bring in generative AI, that changes the game a little, because now it isn't data, it's knowledge. And in advanced companies that are very advanced in the use of data, typically you would have a data pool or a data lake, and then you got all your tooling and your governance and your processes and all that off there, and people work off a common platform. The problem with knowledge in an institution, it's everywhere. It's in a Word document, and that Word document is in your shared folder, right? Now, how do you bring all of that, right, and allow generative AI to be able to make sense of it, synthesize it, and make it searchable? It's going to be a different role from the structured AI ML, the data steward. So I see the data steward role evolving as we go forward. It might not even be the same data steward for AI ML and for unstructured data. It may well be, but let's see how that evolves. But I think that role will evolve, and it'll become extremely important. Now it's a question of not just the data; it's now about knowledge. I mean, and information that is completely unstructured, and everybody's got knowledge, right? I'm working on a document, for example, for this podcast that's sitting on my OneDrive, and there's important information there. Now, somebody else, maybe on call, who works in my unit or in marketing or something, would like to know what I say. then my document's got to be discoverable. It's got to be searchable. So how this, how this will work is stuff that needs to be figured out, right? And so the data steward will have to determine, for example, what kind of metadata do you want on each document, for example, right? Whilst you can describe metadata very strictly for structured data, right, and make it discoverable. It's very difficult because if you've got a credit policy document, as a salesperson, my view of that document is very different from the credit person than from the compliance person. So there are some challenges that need to be figured out. But I think the data steward role will evolve, and it will become a little bit more complex than it is today. Not to say that it's not complex as it is.
And earlier in our conversation, you were talking about how heavily regulated the financial and banking industry is, and as pressures mount for responsible and ethical AI use, I'm curious, what kind of measures do you put into place to ensure that these standards are met? Because as you said a few moments ago, there is no failure. There's no option to get it wrong once. It's got to be right from the outset. So what kind of measures do you have in place here?
So at the moment, we are focusing on everything to be co-pilot, and there must be a human in the loop. That's at the moment the only way we think it's going to work. And it becomes then the responsibility of the human to ensure that what's come out of it is correct. Now, at this level of maturity where Gen AI is still picking up, right, the human knows a lot more, right? And so therefore can become a checker, if you like. But as more and more processes, steps, work gets, you use Gen AI for it, we're going to have to think about how we are smarter about it. But the use cases are quite specific, and the subject matter experts are humans. And so they will continue to have a look at any output. Then we go. So for example, if I'm a sales guy advising you on some product, I will get the generative AI to understand your profile and read through several CIO reports and analyst reports and all that, and make a recommendation. And I will read it and I will say, okay, you know what? This type of insurance is right for Neil, and it makes sense. Now, if we left it to the generative AI, I think you have the risk of the wrong product being proposed, and that becomes a regulatory issue as well if you were to complain. The human in the loop is really, really important in this case, right? And will remain until we're able to figure out that every time we get an output from the generative capability, that it is 100%. Right. And it's not just 100% accuracy, because it's not about it being accurate all the time. Right. There are other issues that come about. One is it's not fully accurate. So it's partially accurate. That doesn't mean the rest of it is wrong. It's just omitting some stuff. Right. So that's one thing still that needs to be dealt with. The other one is it could be factually 100% correct, but is it appropriate? Right. In terms of language, and because the LLMs are still a black box. We don't understand what's going on at the back there. And it's difficult to explain why it came up with the reason. Now, you can do a lot of engineering through chain of thought and all that to figure out why it said what it said, right? In terms of the facts. But in terms of the language, right, that you can't control. That is however whichever LLM you use, that's it. That's the black box, right? And so we've got to be a little bit careful about, a lot of people focus on hallucination, but that's not the only problem that is there. I think appropriateness, bias, I think toxicity, these are things we really need to worry about, despite the fact that the answer might be absolutely 100% factually correct, right? So there's a lot of things outside of hallucination and accuracy that we need to worry about before we let this.
So many great points in there. And for anybody listening that may be sat on the fence at the moment, maybe they're a business leader in the industry wanting to learn more and maybe follow in your footsteps, but want to know more about what the big problems we solve and how we're making things better here. Is there anything you can share around how you're leveraging Gen AI to achieve things like productivity gains across systems, customers and employees? Because there seems to be a lot of rich pickings there.
A quick example would be our customer service officers in the call centers. So we've given them capability to be able to transcribe the call, summarize it, and call out in terms of what actions need to be taken, and then populate that into the system so that they can be, maybe it's a credit card renewal or whatever the case may be, and then it triggers it off straight through. Also, in terms of, through the transcribing of the call, it'll make recommendations. This has resulted into 20% improvement in the talk time, in the handling time of the customer, which allows then the customer service officer to be more empathetic, right? So that they're not rushing to meet their KPI in terms of, I got another call waiting for me, which they do, but it gives them the opportunity to recommend products, understand better the customer's product, empathy. A lot of banking call centers get accused of not having any empathy, right? And these are all winners, right? I mean, if you're happy with the way you've been handled, despite the fact that it was a problem, the likelihood of you coming back to me is much higher than before, right? So we are seeing productivity gains there. In our branches, we're seeing that the branch officers looking for information to serve a customer and type of documentation, product or compliance related, this is now available at their fingertips with a bot, and this has reduced their daily time by nearly 8%, 6 to 8%. So we're starting to see that again frees up the time for them to do quality work with the customer or at the end of the day for their back office work and all that. So we're seeing some very good traction, and this is what we're after. Again, as I say, Copilot allows us to make sure that whatever's coming out is appropriate and correct, and then we can pass it on to the customer. So then there's many more. I mean, we're working with relationship managers, we're working with sales. I will give you one more example since you are an example. For many of the large corp relationship managers, one of the most difficult thing was establishing the ESG standards of an organization, right? And this is typically hidden in about 120-page report that every company will publish every year. And we're looking for between 15 and 17 criteria to establish whether indeed we're willing to do business with these people and do their ESG, does their ESG philosophy match with our ESG philosophy? Now, typically, you can imagine reading a 120-page document, especially when it's an ESG report, that's better than sleeping pills, right? I mean, it's hard. So it takes very long. So we've been able to build capability that will take the entire ESG report and within a minute pump out all the criteria that we want, depending on what industry they are in, thereby significantly reducing the amount of toil that a relationship manager needs to go through.
Fantastic. And in the face of the age-old paranoia of machines versus humans, it's old as time itself. We've seen it for hundreds, if not thousands of years, but we're still here now. This time it's AI. So how are you at DBS Bank addressing some of those concerns and fostering trust in AI technologies, whether it be your customers or employees? I'm sure you get this a lot, but how are you dealing with that initial myth or preconception that some may have?
So if you think, there's 3 levels of impact here, right? One is where there's augmentation, right? So I'm going to give you a tool. It works together with you, right? And if you need to write a better email, just go in, put in your bullet points, out comes very nice language, saves you 15, 20 minutes, all that kind of stuff. This is very easy to do, right? And when you tell people and explain to people the capabilities, people don't ask questions as to, is this going to take my job? Okay. Copilot, right? And we want to co-pilot everything. And we really do believe actually Copilot is more internally we call it co-worker, right? So I've got somebody who's I'm going to work with, right? So this has a degree of impact, right? So where it really complements, for example, the customer service officers, they love it. It was unbelievable. There was skepticism at the beginning, but once they figured it out, they were like, "Oh wow, this is great. Please embed it in our workflow." And we did. And we don't have any complaints. People love it. Yeah. And there's this, I think the call center in Singapore, we've got 500 people on it, which is great. And so that's great. So that's one side of the coworker. The other side of the coworker is if it takes away a significant amount of work, which was administrative in nature, right? Then we need to think about upskilling, right? And so if you've got an assistant salesperson, how could we make this person a salesperson, right? And do a skills analysis and say, okay, here's a program that will get you up there, right? And the point of this is, if you've got more salespeople out there, you're going to get more sales, right? Mm-hmm. So there's nothing wrong in that. That's great. Yeah. So there's a level of change management there, right? But it's more a positive story, if you like, right? The third, which is where there's a significant impact on the role, right? And if you took we haven't really done this work here, but as an example, if you took an analyst, somebody who was, whose job was to pick 4, 5, 6 documents every day, understand what they said, and then synthesize it into one pager or 2-pager and all that. Generative AI will take these tasks and can do these tasks in minutes and all that kind of stuff. So here we really do think about reskilling. Now, this is not the first time we're thinking about this. We embarked on the digital age in 2014, right? And at that time, nobody was talking about digitization in the financial industry, right? Everybody was happy with what they were doing. And we were like, we want to go end-to-end digital, front-end, web, mobile, instant fulfillment, customization, N equals 1, all that stuff. People are like, oh my God, we're going to lose jobs because you don't need operations. You don't need all the servicing is going to be done by through chat and all that. Then we don't need call centers. In fact, no jobs went away. New jobs appeared. And people who got impacted, right, with the more mundane operational jobs like sorting paper, right? I mean, they got reskilled, right, to do operational tasks, to become makers, to become checkers, right? They became sales assistants. They became customer service agents, right? They went and worked in the front line in the branches. So we've got to approach it the same way. And what's going to happen is you're going to find that today everybody thinks that it's 90% it's going to take jobs away and 10% going to help. Actually, in reality, it's the other way around. It always has been. When the cars came, this is what they thought about the horses. Actually, no, it's riding on the digital wave, and it's a big step forward, right? But it's a step forward and not a complete paradigm shift.
100% with you. And I think, as you said there, that reskilling and upskilling, that is so important. So it's great to hear how you're pushing that forward too. And if we look ahead into 2025 and beyond, I know it's almost impossible to predict the future now, but how do you envision the future of AI in banking, particularly in terms of customer experience, operational efficiency? How do you see all this evolving?
So, like I say, this is going to, and it will. So one, I agree that there will be impact and there will be efficiencies across many areas. But what a great opportunity. This gives you the ability to invest in the right places in a very meaningful and thoughtful way, right? Like every organization, everybody's got pressure, right? We've got cost pressures, we've got revenue pressures, market pressures, all that kind of stuff. Same everywhere. This gives us the opportunity to be able to create capacity, right? And with this capacity, how do we invest this capacity? Now, in some cases, we will want to increase customer experience. We will want to increase revenue. So we want to put those resources that we've been able to free up there. In some cases, we may say, hey, look, this efficiency is so good, right? And there isn't that much work here. So maybe we'll take a little bit of the productivity gains there and reduce some cost in some places. It's not a, hey, here's a strategy that's going to reduce our cost by this much. Or here's a strategy that's going to increase revenue or customer experience by so much. It's a combination of things. That one organization is not a single unit, right? It's not a single cell animal. It's quite complex. And so I think it's horses for courses. But for me, and at least for DBS, what we look at is this, it's an amazing opportunity to invest in the right place, dial up customer experience, because if we do that, right, and we increase customer loyalty, our customers will be stickier, they will be happier, they will spend more with us and not leave us. And that is already a big plus.
And I think that is a beautiful moment to end on today. But before I do let you go, we've talked a lot about the future, where we're heading and the problems we're solving with technology. And you've had a hugely successful career. And I'd love for you to look back for a moment and have a think about someone that maybe helped you get you where you are today, someone you're grateful towards, maybe someone that invested a little time in you and helped you get you where you are today. Who would that person be and why? It'd be great to give them a little shout out today.
Oh, well, look, there have been different people at different stages of my career. But maybe the first person that really had an impact on me was a guy called Andrew Ruand when I was working back in South Africa. And I was doing sales engineering at the time. And we walked into quite a large coal plant outside of Johannesburg. And he said, okay, over to you. It's your big sale. You do this, then your career is taken off and you're going to get a promotion and all that kind of stuff. And I was super excited, of course. And I went in and talked. And as a sales guy would in their early 20s, and walked out. And so I said, hey, I think we got the deal. And he goes, I'm not quite sure about that. And he goes, what do you mean? I think I covered every angle possible. And he goes, here's one lesson for you. Don't ever forget, right? He goes, it's easy to talk yourself into a deal, right? It's even easier to talk yourself out of the deal. Remember when to shut up. So that was the first, but I've been blessed. Actually, I've had many people that have been extremely influential in my career over time. And I've switched careers between logistics and now in banking. And you can imagine in mid-career to move industries entirely it's quite difficult. And if you don't have the right people around you to help you and mentor you, it's quite difficult. So I'm blessed in that way. But there's one, if you like, story. Yeah. It's very important to know when to keep quiet.
Yeah, great story, great message behind it as well. And we've covered so much today in our conversation. I'm sure there's a few light bulb moments going off. People are going to want to find out more information. So for those people listening, where's the best place to find you or your team online and just ultimately find out more about anything we discussed today?
So obviously, I'm go to my LinkedIn page. I post quite regularly. So there's a lot of stuff in terms of where we do. Keep a lookout for the press releases that we have. There's many more coming and a lot of exciting stuff. We have a DBS LinkedIn page, which is also quite active, and our website also. So plenty of places to reach out. If anybody wants to reach out to me personally, obviously LinkedIn is the easiest way to do it. But there's a lot of, and not just me, by the way, my colleagues, my team members, they're also quite active. They post in various areas, be it responsible AI, be it the use of tooling platforms, all the kind of stuff, governance. And of course, use cases and what we're doing with both generative AI and traditional AI.
Awesome. Well, I'll get links added to everything you mentioned there so people can find you nice and easily. And just love chatting with you today about the value creation that Gen AI can deliver and the steps needed to unlock the technology's fullest potential, not to mention exploring the role of data stewards, how that role is evolving and ensuring accuracy, quality and security. And also how DBS, how you're leveraging Gen AI to contribute to things like productivity gains throughout the organization for everything from systems, customers and employees alike. We hear a lot about AI, but I think it's stories like that and the messages that you've delivered today. I think that is what brings it all to life and what we're talking about here. So thanks for sharing your insights today.
And thank you very much for having me. You had got some nice, deep, probing questions. So hopefully people will find this valuable. A pleasure.
As generative AI continues to reshape the financial industry, how can banks like DBS strike the right balance between innovation and responsibility? Well, Nimish has shared insights into DBS Bank's approach to leveraging AI for transformative gains. But most importantly, they're doing this while ensuring ethical oversight and human involvement. And the big question for you listening is, how are you or your organisation going to adapt similarly in these advancements? And what steps will you take to unlock the full potential of AI in a responsible and impactful way? You've heard from me, you've heard from Nimish. What about yourself? Email me, techblogwriter@outlook.com, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, just @NeilCHughes. Let me know your thoughts and how you're tackling these topics. But that's it for today. I've got another guest lined up bright and early for you tomorrow. We're going to go into a completely different topic. But more than anything, thank you for listening today. And I will speak to you all bright and early tomorrow morning. Bye for now.